For many, the journey is almost over as the migrant caravan from Honduras has reached Tijuana. But what's next for immigrants seeking asylum in the U.S.?
If you look at the bowl-shaped area behind me, it's a perfect fire trap.
Sounding the alarm about building homes in semi-rural areas where the fire danger can be very high. And researchers head to Imperial Beach to study the effects of sea level rise. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm Susan Murphy. Hundreds of migrants traveling in a caravan from Honduras have made it to Tijuana. Several hundred got there last night. More than 300 arrived today. Many say they are hoping to seek asylum in the U.S. KPBS border reporter Jean Guerrero spent the day in Tijuana, where she spoke with some of the travelers.
I'm in Playa de Tijuana on the beach on the Mexican side of the border with the caravan of migrants. Right as we were arriving here today, we actually saw two women with their child scale the fence and jump the fence and immediately turn themselves into Border Patrol. You see Border Patrol on the other side of the fence. You see soldiers from the troops that were sent down to reinforce their efforts. We also saw people climbing the fence, sitting on the fence. There have been people who have been trying to enter the U.S. illegally from this caravan. But most of these people have expressed a desire to ask for asylum in the U.S., which entails waiting for weeks, sometimes months. One of the people who I spoke to about this was Nelson Castañeda, a Honduran man from the caravan.
I'm going to respect the laws of the United States. We are fleeing violence, and I'm willing to wait.
So the challenge now is finding a space for these hundreds of people who are arriving in Tijuana, who are going to have to face long wait times to enter the United States the legal way through the ports of entry. Tijuana has several migrant shelters, but most of them are at capacity already, mostly because there are so many people fleeing violence in southern Mexican states like Michoacan and Guerrero, so they don't have room for the caravan. But I spoke to an official earlier who said that they're equipping a sports club near downtown, which has a football arena where they're going to set up tents for 2,000 of these migrants. But there are still more coming, and it's unclear how Tijuana is going to be able to house all of these. So that's really the question that we have right now. Reporting from Tijuana, Jean Guerrero, KPBS News.
Tijuana's head of migrant services says some of the immigrants who arrived yesterday went to a stretch of border fence to celebrate. KPBS reporter Priya Sridhar has that part of the story.
Around 50 people stood outside the gate at Borderfield State Park. It isn't clear whether any of them are part of the caravan of Central American migrants who've been traveling toward the border. CBP says a number of people scaled the fence but ran back across the border, so the armed agents waiting on the U.S. side did not need to intervene. Helicopters flew overhead and a drone appeared to monitor the crowd from the Mexican side. Melinda Aporta was one of several San Diegans who showed up too to watch it all unfold.
I just came out to see, this is history in the making right here. And, I'm interested like everybody else. I saw it on the news, so I wanted to get a firsthand glimpse of what's going on out here.
Others wanted to send a message to the migrants.
I came out here because I'm a big supporter of the Border Patrol, and I think this caravan is an abuse of our system. They're trying to abuse our system and bypass the immigration system. So I want to see it stopped.
Military troops have been deployed at the border to help put concertina wire on the partition to stop and deter anyone from illegally entering. Priya Sridhar, KPBS News.
As more migrants arrive, Defense Secretary Jim Mattis is defending the use of active duty troops on the border. He says in some ways it provides good training for war and compared it to deploying against Pancho Villa a century ago. 5,800 troops are now deployed, and there's no word on when their mission might end. More than 1,600 residents in East County are still without power. It's part of a planned outage by SDG&E to prevent any fallen power lines from sparking fires. The National Weather Service expects the red flag warnings to end in San Diego County this evening. That includes several backcountry areas. SDG&E says the process to restore power is a lengthy one.
We need to inspect every power line and all of our infrastructure to ensure that it's safe and that there's no debris in there. We do this by a couple of ways. There are crews on the ground and firefighters, contract firefighters on the ground inspecting lines. We also have helicopters in the air visually inspecting all of our lines. Once it's deemed that those lines are safe and there's no debris in them or there's no damage, then we'll restore power.
Winds are expected to die down tonight, but humidity levels will remain extremely low. Governor Jerry Brown toured the fire-devastated town of Paradise today with Secretary of the Interior Ryan Zinke. The campfire tore through the community, killing 48 people and destroying 7,000 homes. At a news conference, state and federal officials said they'll work side by side to help fire victims recover as quickly as possible.
This is so devastating that I don't really have the words to describe it. It looks like a war zone. It is. It's the devastation that only fires of this kind could bring about. Nobody's really expecting it, but it happens.
Governor Brown says he signed an executive order today that will accelerate delivery of various state services to people who have been displaced by the wildfires. The campfire is about 35% contained and has burned 135,000 acres. 200 people are reported missing. There may be a third victim in the Woolsey fire. Authorities say a body was found Tuesday in a burned-out home in Agora Hills. This fire has burned 394 square miles in Ventura and Los Angeles counties. Hundreds of homes have been destroyed. Firefighters may be getting a break. Forecasters are expecting winds to slack off. News of the growing death toll from the wildfires burning north of Los Angeles and in Butte County has sparked anxiety about new housing developments being approved on the outskirts of San Diego's urban areas. KPBS reporter, North County reporter Allison St. John visited the site of new developments in the hills west of Escondido.
San Diego County is in desperate need of more housing, which is why the county supervisors approved this summer about 10,000 new homes in semi-rural, urban interface kinds of areas like this. This is Harmony Grove Village development, which was already approved some years ago, but the supervisors have just approved a new development right here. And the problem is, as Rick Halsey of the Chaparral Institute says, this is a very high fire-prone area.
Well, this whole valley, the Harmony Grove Valley, burned in the Cocos fire, and it came up over the hills there. And the Harmony Grove community, which is right behind us, burned completely, and this whole valley ignited. And so it's a fire corridor. And if you look at the bowl-shaped area behind me, it's a perfect fire trap. And the development that they want to put in here has one exit, which is right over there. And they're saying the roads are going to be wide enough, but in these fire events, you just don't have any time. And the issue is, I think, that we're operating on the last 50 years of knowledge and fire fighting experience. That just doesn't count anymore. We've got a new environment with climate change and drying climate conditions everywhere, and these fires move so fast that you just can't get people out fast enough.
The Center for Biological Diversity sent a letter to the San Diego County Board of Supervisors today saying that decision makers who choose to approve developments in areas like this need to develop better strategies to make them safer from fire. Bearing in mind what's happened in Paradise this last week, this is a very important message. And interestingly, the county has decided to delay a vote on Lilac Hills, which is another big development up here in North County, until next year. Reporting from North County, Allison St. John, KPBS News.
Imperial Beach is getting a boost from San Diego researchers who will help the low-lying community better understand the risk of flooding. KPBS environment reporter Eric Anderson has the story.
Scripps Institution of Oceanography researchers are installing monitors that will help the coastal community understand when the risk of flooding goes up. Scripps scientist Mark Merrifield says in the short term, the sensors will measure waves and ocean levels so city officials get a better sense of when flooding events might occur. The long-term impact could help the city deal with climate change.
To understand that or to plan for that, you would need a pretty good sense of what the frequency, the duration of flooding, the number of events you expect to get each year. All of that, I think, goes into planning for the future, and that's really sort of more the intent of the project.
Merrifield hopes to get a full winter's worth of data this year, and there's a chance the sensors could be working through next year as well, which would give scientists an even better picture of the challenges facing Imperial Beach. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
A new resource and recovery center for people struggling with drug addictions opened today in San Diego. It's part of the county's effort to expand treatment options and tackle the opioid crisis. Community members and county leaders gathered at the Mission Valley Recovery Center for a ribbon-cutting ceremony. Gerald McFadden, the president and CEO of Volunteers of America Southwest, is overseeing the center. He says it's intended for low-income people who have recently completed a residential drug treatment program, but still need support with housing, job training, medical care, and counseling.
It will be a safe environment where individuals can come and get the reinforcement and encouragement and support that they need to be able to continue their recovery journey.
The Resource and Recovery Center will help approximately 500 people per year and will serve as a model for future facilities across the county. Last year, more than 500 people in the county died from drug overdoses. Dollar stores aren't just surviving, they're thriving. Marketplace reporter Rima Crace explains how dollar stores can still sell things for $1 and how the Great Recession helped create a lot more customers for dollar stores across the country.
Not only are dollar stores still around, since the Great Recession, they've exploded.
This is Josh Kubley from Keesler Air Force Base in Mississippi. And I've always wondered, how can dollar stores still sell stuff for $1?
The two largest dollar store chains in the country are Dollar General and Dollar Tree, which also owns Family Dollar. Together, they have more than 27,000 stores in the continental United States. And this doesn't even begin to include all the mom and pop shops or the smaller dollar store chains. So, how can dollar stores buck inflation and still turn a profit? I went to a 99-cents only store in Montebello, California to find out. Do you care when people call your stuff cheap?
My favorite thing is when people are walking out with a basket full of merchandise. They're like, this stuff is cheap. And I'm like, well, come back again and buy more cheap stuff.
Jason Kidd is the Senior Vice President of Operations for 99 Cents Only, which has nearly 400 stores across the western U.S.
A lot of times it's product that a vendor is trying to unload somewhere that somebody else didn't buy. They can bring it to us. We take all of it, but we take it at a much lower cost than other retailers would.
Each dollar store has its own tactics to keep prices low. But in general, they can sell stuff at a cheap price because of what they sell and where they get it. Some are famous for selling off-brand stuff, which they sometimes get made specifically for their stores.
It's like a poop emoji unicorn, right? But this was an item we designed.
But they also do sell brand name items, often in sizes and quantities specifically made for the dollar stores.
If we can sell something at 99 cents that may be a little smaller pack, but it's $4 somewhere else, it's still a very, very strong value.
Each chain does this differently. At Dollar Tree, for example, a 2-pack of Irish Spring soap costs $1. At Target, an 8-pack costs $3.99. But if you look very closely, the bars sold at Dollar Tree, they're smaller. So if you do the math, Irish Spring by the ounce is actually more expensive at Dollar Tree. But the smaller quantity gives customers the option to buy what they need right now. 99 Cents Only focuses on places where there are lots of people in high-density markets. But the thing is, we're also seeing explosive growth in rural areas with much smaller populations. Why? Well, it's less risky for dollar stores to go where other retailers won't. Let's look at Walmart, for example. It cost the company more than $15 million to build a supercenter. $15 million. So Walmart has to pick areas with enough potential customers to make money. Dollar General, on the other hand, its startup costs can be as little as $250,000. So you can say the risk is relatively low. That means dollar stores can go into smaller markets where you may not find as many grocery stores or retailers. But maybe one of the most important reasons dollar stores are able to turn a profit with such cheap merchandise is because economic instability is opportunity. During the Great Recession, when other companies were shutting down, many dollar stores, they were expanding. They started carrying more groceries and household essentials, stealing customers from other retailers.
History would tell you that yes, we did have a spike in sales when the recession was going on.
For decades, wages have stayed pretty stagnant, which means the median household income is roughly at the same level today as it was in the late 90s. And that's caused the middle class to shrink. And it's something dollar stores are very aware of. Here's what the Dollar General's CEO, Todd Vassos, recently told the Wall Street Journal. The economy is continuing to create more of our core customer. Translation, dollar stores are betting big on a growing and permanent lower class. They found a way to get customers no one else was able to get to. They sell a ton of cheap stuff at a ton of cheap stores, and they've built a business model that capitalizes on economic instability. So why can dollar stores still afford to sell stuff for $1? Well, because a lot of us can't afford anything else.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, fearing the worst. With wildfires still raging across California, concerns grow for those still missing. Coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
It was gusty in Escondido today. Santa Ana winds blowing up to 25 miles per hour should die down after tonight, but the dry air could stick around a little longer. Julia Wyden has details in tonight's forecast.
No sign in the immediate near future of any rain coming back into our area here. Looking at your satellite and radar imagery, staying dry all throughout Southern California. Unfortunately, also staying a bit blustery, although the good news is that the winds are going to be decreasing as we go through tonight. Want to point out the dry air is very dry. You look at the dew points here and those numbers are in the teens. When you see dew point numbers that low, it means you have very little humidity to work with. It's been this combination of the dry air and the gusty winds that have really caused fires to spread recently. As we look at our future cast here going through tonight, you can see we'll still have winds up in those higher elevations at about 25 to even 30 miles per hour, but the gusts will be backing off. Good news there. As we head on into Thursday, those winds will be light enough that we'll no longer be under a red flag warning. Forecast for tonight, again, winds gradually subsiding. Temperatures are going to drop their way down into the 40s in most spots. In the metro area, we'll make it down to about 52, but outlying areas could be a little bit cooler. Mostly clear skies tonight. Generally, again, quiet weather. We still have high fire risk throughout a lot of Southern California through the day on Thursday, despite the fact that we won't have those higher gusting winds in place. Again, since those fires are already around, it won't take a whole lot for them to spread. A lot of sunshine during the day tomorrow. Forecast for areas like Chula Vista should be up to about 83 degrees. Oceanside, 77. Again, your winds won't be as gusty. As we head on into the weekend, we will see warming conditions all throughout the Southwest. I do want to point out, though, that next week we are going to see a system moving back on shore, and by the middle of next week, that should increase the moisture and potentially increase the rain chances as well. Coastal areas are dry, though, for the next several days. Highs are going to be in the 70s. Taking you inland, forecast here 82 for Thursday, cooler for Friday and the weekend. Mountainous areas will be in the 50s, and a look at what's in store for the deserts. Temperatures going to be at their warmest on Friday. Back to you, Susan.
U.S. farmers are exploring how science can help improve crops and livestock. AP reporter Kathy Young looks at the future of gene editing in agriculture.
These cows in California were spared a painful procedure.
Dairy cows, like Holsteins, grow horns, and they're quite dangerous for human workers and also for their fellow cows, and so they're normally manually removed.
Instead, scientists genetically remove their horns through gene editing.
It's kind of a pair of molecular scissors, if you will, that you can tell to go and cut the DNA at a very precise location in the genome. And what that enables you to do is go in and very precisely alter one particular gene of the thousands of genes that make up the genome, and you can introduce useful genetic variations.
Variations like soybeans edited to grow with more heart-healthy fat, or mushrooms that don't brown. It sounds like GMOs are genetically modified foods, but it isn't.
A lot of the consumer resistance to accepting GMO technology is that we're moving foreign genes from other organisms. Using genome editing, what we're doing is changing the sequence of the DNA in the plant, the natural sequence itself. Fruit's already coming down.
Fred Gmitter hopes gene editing will help save Florida's citrus industry.
See very small leaves.
It's being devastated by a disease called citrus greening.
For Florida, it has cut our production from about 240 million boxes, maybe 15 to 18 years ago, down to 45 million boxes in the last season.
Despite its promise, some critics are concerned about how gene-edited foods will be regulated.
I think the vast majority of the products will be safe, but somebody needs to be looking out for those cases where a mishap may happen or the developer of the product may miss some important health or environmental consequence.
U.S. agriculture officials say no new rules are needed for plants that could have been developed through more traditional methods, clearing the way for about 24 gene-edited crops so far. That includes the heart-healthier soybean oil. Products made with it will likely hit grocery stores next year. But officials are debating how animal-based products will be regulated. Kathy Young, Associated Press.
Yeast, air, carbon dioxide, all different chemical components in the process of hard apple cider making. In tonight's SciTech Report, producer Luke Groskin takes a look at how the 9-Pin Cider Works in upstate New York uses chemistry to brew cider.
Cider making is about 50% chemistry, and the other 50% is the art. I mean, it's like the Wild West, and we've got everything that's cool about winemaking, and we got the freedom that's in the culture of craft beer making. My name is Alejandro Del Perel, and I make 9-Pin cider for a living. We probably have about 750,000 to 1 million pounds of apples in the cider at any given time, if you were to translate all our liquid into physical apple weight, which is a lot of fruit. And it gives you sort of an idea of how many apples we process. A lot of cider making does involve chemistry and an understanding of chemical reactions that occur during fermentation. Fermentation is the conversion of sugar by yeast into carbon dioxide and alcohol, and the gas coming out of there is carbon dioxide. You can make alcohol out of anything with sugar in it, so any apple will do, but the type of apple you use will obviously influence what your final cider is going to taste like. New York, we're #1 in the nation for apple varieties, so we grow more types of apples than any other state. That's a huge palette of little nuanced flavors to work with, and so this is essentially a cider maker's dream place. When you bring in the sweet juice, fresh pressed from the orchard, a lot of times there's so much sugar in there that it's hard to judge how sour the fermented version of it will be. So we test acidity by doing an acid-base titration, which essentially you take a known quantity of base and then you add cider to it, and then you add a base back to that, and based on the difference you can calculate what the perceived sourness of your final cider is going to be like. Yeast is another great aspect in the cider making process that you can tweak to come up with different cider styles. We use predominantly a commercial white wine yeast. It gives our cider sort of a Prosecco, Moscato, sparkling wine-like quality. But we also make a cider with a Belgian yeast, which will give the cider, the aroma is sort of banana-esque and tropical fruity. There's tons of natural yeast that it's in cider. It's all found in the skins of the apples and the juice and the air in the cidery. And the problem with natural yeast is that there's no controlling what kind of flavor they'll impart on the cider. So sulfites, or sulfur dioxide, helps prevent those microbes from establishing themselves and allows the cider to age and mature without essentially turning to vinegar or generating other off flavors. We do things like co-fermentation, so that's where we actually will ferment the cider with other ingredients. Take blueberries, for example. It's not like you're adding blueberry flavoring, you're actually allowing the yeast to consume the sugar within that blueberry and produce whatever blueberry flavor the yeast decides to produce. So it results in like a really well-integrated blueberry note. So it goes from fresh pressed juice to our full alcohol content in about 7 days. Then we transfer the cider into a newly sanitized secondary fermentation vessel, and it will sit in that vessel for anywhere from 3 months to a year. Then it gets transferred into our package and sent off to the markets. You know, because it's such a new category, there's no real expectation, there's no real tradition. Not only can we be experimental like a winemaker would be with the types of grapes they use and, you know, aging practices, but we can also be experimental in the way a craft brewer would be in terms of infusions and fermenting with other non-apple ingredients.
Here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. On Morning Edition, we'll take a closer look at sentencing reform and the bipartisan push to move it forward. And on Midday Edition, knowledge at your fingertips. Why learn history when it's already on your phone? That's tomorrow on KPBS Radio. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thank you for joining us. Have a great evening.